Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Frugal Garage. Definitely the response I got from the last video was pretty positive, so I'm gonna try to push out more content now because there's clearly an interest in it. A lot of positive feedback, so thanks for that. This time I'm going to be putting in a boost controller. I'll be talking about the difference between both of these and why you don't need to spend a ton of money on these, because it's a very simple mechanism. I'll disassemble each one if I can and maybe try to draw it out or explain it or whatever, just so everybody understands what's going on. And I've even got a turbo here for demonstration so I can show you how it all works, and hopefully it'll be a pretty informative video. Now the problem I need to address is that the boost currently will not go past 12 psi. I'd like to get to around 15 psi. I am still running the stock ECU. However, that happened to the engine 2 years ago, so not too worried about it. This, you're not gonna stay up. This motor, when I got it 2 years ago, had a manual boost controller in it. It was a different style. I ended up taking it out because I used it on another vehicle while the engine was blown and then sold that vehicle. What happened was the boost was turned up to 18 psi on these stock pistons. I tried to turn it down, went for a drive, actually ended up turning it up. It spiked to like 20 psi or something crazy like that. And then I heard a miss, and then all of a sudden the car started running like shit. And this is why. Broke the ring lands right off the pistons. Luckily it didn't do too much damage to the engine inside. There was a little bit of a scrape at the top of the cylinder wall, and I got the machine shop to fix that up, I mean. And the engine is fully built now. It's got Eagle H-beam rods and Ross racing pistons with a Cometic head gasket. Fully built. It's good for probably 400 horsepower at least. But I just wanted to get the thing on the road, so it's currently sitting stock ECU, stock injectors, fuel rail, fuel pump, all that kind of stuff, and that's pretty much it. So let's get to it. I'll get to the explanation, and then hopefully you'll learn something today. How do these both work? Well, first, to understand how these work, you kind of need to know how a turbo works, and if you don't really know how they do work, or if you do, I'm going to explain it anyways. So how does a turbo work? Well, you have your compressor side and your exhaust side. This is hooked up to the exhaust. Exhaust comes through the turbo, spins around that turbine, and makes that spin, thus making the other side, the compressor side, spin and pressurizes your intake, and that's how you get boost. Now, this here is the wastegate. This here is the wastegate actuator. This thing here, there's a diaphragm in here. And the way that you regulate this on a stock vehicle is there is a line hooked up from the wastegate actuator to the compressor housing. This particular turbo doesn't have it set up like that. I think on this car it's hooked up to the intake. Whatever is gonna get you that pressurized air to there, and once you get the pressure, there's a diaphragm in here. Once you get the pressure on here, it pushes it open and moves this rod back and forth. And when that happens, the wastegate will open up. Now, what happens there is that the wastegate opens up and the exhaust just comes straight out of here instead of going around the turbine and making the turbo spin even faster. That's how it's regulated. Now, being a bleed style boost controller, this is how you would hook it up. So what happens is the pressurized air from here, you're creating a leak. So to apply about, let's say it's set for 6 psi that this opens. In order to push 6 psi on here with a leak, the turbo then has to spin a bit faster to overcome that leak and then apply that. So that's all you're doing here. You turn this out, control the leak, and then your boost pressure increases as a result. Just a quick mock-up of how this would be set up. This would usually, on a different style of turbo, that's how it is on the MR2, hook right up to the compressor housing. This one doesn't have that, so it would theoretically just be kind of like this or somewhere along the intake. Straight connection from pressurized straight to the wastegate actuator, and then you turn this in and out to control the leak and therefore control how much boost there is. Now all both of these are is just a tapered valve that it's a tapered shaft that sits in a seat. The other one, it's kind of, you can't really see what's going on in there, so I'll just show you on this one. But yeah, you just, as you wind it out, you then see the port start to become uncovered like that. So that's all that is. That's how they work inside. So what ended up happening was the other two boost controllers, I guess, could not move enough air. This one here. Tried both of them, the eBay one and this one. They're both bleed styles, like I said. Neither of them ended up working, so I got my hands on this ball and spring type. I did have to modify it a little bit. I'll just show you how this one works here. So these ones, this one actually did start working for me, but the spring inside kept falling to the side. I'll show you here in a second. So pretty simple. You got a ball, a spring, and a bolt. Now I modified it and put this longer bolt in. The problem with the old one was that the spring would kind of go off to the side on me. It kept kind of cocking off to the side and jamming up, so I just put this longer one in, rounded the tip of it off so that when it's in there, the spring won't walk around, it'll kind of stay centered. So I did have to modify it a little tiny bit, but not really a big deal. A better designed one would probably not have that issue, but this thing's, I don't know, pretty cheap looking. However, it does work. So the problem I was having was, you can see the spring in there. Don't lose that ball. You can see the spring in there. It kept kinking over to the side and then not working anymore. So I pretty much resolved that by just doing this. Now, all that this does is you have your ball and your spring. This thing puts the preload on the spring, and you just dial it in, and the ball pushes against the back of this fitting. And then once your turbo starts hitting boost, depending on the preload on the spring, it'll pop it and then exit out this port and then push your wastegate open. There is a little teeny hole for bleeding off a little bit of excess pressure so that the pressure doesn't get trapped between this and the wastegate and keeping it open, I guess. So just a better overall design. I mean, these, I have seen people actually make these by hand. I could probably do a video on how to make them because they're pretty simple, and I do have a tap set that I could do that with. So what I'm going to do is take this modified one and put it in the car. I know this is going to work this time because I was hitting almost 14 PSI until the spring started popping out to the side here. So once this is in, then I definitely should be able to hit 15 PSI. Okay, let's go test this thing out. Oh great, it's fucking snowing. Okay, so it's just snowing a bit, but you know what? That's not going to stop me because they haven't put any salt down and the roads are only just wet. It's not actually sticking to the street, so here we go. That felt great, but let's back her off a little bit so I don't melt the piston. So some final thoughts on the whole thing. Bleed style boost controllers, fine probably for a couple PSI, but I mean overall I would say don't even really waste your time. Just go get a ball and spring style. I've seen them as cheap as like $10 on eBay, and such a simple mechanism, as you saw from me taking it apart. I mean, there's really nothing to them. And I mean, don't worry too much about this channel being all about MR2s. I do happen to own a 2010 STI hatch and a 98 F-150. Both need some work done. I'll be modifying the STI a little bit, but I mean, don't think that this is just going to be about one vehicle. And then I have friends' vehicles that I want to work on and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of variety, from tuners to domestic to whatever, you know. So basically keep on watching, and hopefully I can manage to keep your interest long enough. And you know, I'm just kind of finding my feet with this channel right now. We'll see what happens, but you know, I'll just try to keep pushing out the videos, and we'll see where it goes from there. Tomorrow I'll probably start filming the next episode. Just to give you an idea of what I'm doing next, I'm going to be working on the MR2 power steering system, because there is almost no information out there in reliable places. There's lots of dead links everywhere, almost no information. Nobody knows how to work on them. So I've got the instruction manual. I'm going to get my multimeter, get all that stuff going, and then I'll start working on that. And because the power steering system on this car has not worked since I owned it, and it's been kind of annoying not having it. So it's just good to have it working at some point. So we'll see what happens. And I've never really screwed around with it, so I may not even fix it. We'll see what happens, but it'll just be kind of a how-to video on how to go through the steps and check everything over and all that kind of stuff. So keep watching, and yeah, we'll see where it goes.